Donald Trump has unveiled plans for a new class of battleship named after himself. He pledged that the Trump-class vessels would be bigger, faster and 100 times more powerful than the last US battleships. They were decommissioned decades ago after the Navy deemed them obsolete due to modern submarine and missile technology. Here's the president speaking at his Florida compound Mar-a-Lago.
We envision that these ships will be the first of a whole new class of battleships to be produced in the years to come. From Theodore Roosevelt, the Great White Fleet, you remember that, the Great White Fleet, to the legendary USS Missouri, whose massive guns helped win World War II. America's battleships have always been unmistakable symbols of national power. We stopped making them for whatever reason, I don't know.
And let's bring in military analyst Marina Miron from King's College London. Marina, will these battleships be bigger, faster and 100 times more powerful than previous ones built by the US?
Good evening, Ben. Well, given the fact that the US hasn't built any battleships, if I'm not mistaken, since the Second World War, it is to assume that these will be modern battleships, as President Trump has indicated, equipped with modern sensors, with modern hypersonic missiles, which is a question because the US hasn't quite finalized developing those technologies and energy-directed weapons and things like that. So they will be definitely more modern. The question is, what role are they going to play? Because there is a reason that battleships have been decommissioned and the United States Navy has switched to the use of destroyers in order to understand the difference. So battleships have more armor, bigger guns. Destroyers have more maneuverability, but they have longer range guns. And so the Navy didn't see any use in big battleships designed for sea combat, for facing adversary navies in the sea. And therefore, the question is, what purpose is it going to serve and how it is going to change the naval doctrine and redesign naval operations?
And just rewind for a second for our viewers. Explain to us why battleships have become obsolete since the Second World War.
Well, this is precisely the reason is the advancements in technology, advancements in technologies related to submarines. If we look at what the Russians and the Chinese are doing in that domain, and I think the primary concern will be China for the United States when it comes to its foreign policy priorities, and especially the fact that China's navy is larger, even if it's qualitatively inferior to the one the United States has. So the idea was you wouldn't have those naval battles like a century ago. You would design operations differently. You would have aircraft carriers supported by destroyers rather than large unmaneuverable vessels, which are very expensive, which take long to build, and which can become, in face of modern technology, an easy target, with an example being the Russian Moscow, or generally the experience that the Black Sea Fleet has seen in defending against Ukrainian drones, both surface and underwater drones. And we have seen how this asymmetric capability has forced the Black Sea Fleet on its back foot.
So big floating targets, which have now, because of technology, become even bigger targets. And you mentioned the time it would take. How long would it realistically take to build just 2 of these battleships, say, as is the plan?
Well, it depends, because first we need to think about complexity. As I mentioned before, Donald Trump was talking about hypersonic weapons, so the design of those and testing obviously would have to be finalized. Then we don't have a benchmark, because we're talking about data from the Second World War, and if we're talking about the likes of USS North Carolina class, it took about 3 years to build, but the problem is complexity of contemporary vessels, meaning sensors, meaning guns, meaning armor. integration into the whole system. And then since it's a military ship, it also has to comply with specific standards. It needs testing, longer testing than a civilian vessel. So that could be maybe 4 years, depending on the shipyard, whether it's Navy shipyard or whether it's some private company or a collaboration between the two. So there are many factors that need to be considered. And of course, things like supply chain, energy costs, raw materials, and so on will factor into both the cost and the time of building the first vessel of this kind. Of course, the second and the subsequent one will take less time, but the first one takes the longest.
Okay, thank you very much for walking us through that, Marina. Military analyst Marina Miron, thanks for being on the show again.